tube moves during flexion and extension, it's kind of like, if you look at it from the side, the posterior fibers would be moving this way and the anterior fibers would be moving that way, okay? So the vertebral bodies, they're single bones, right? The vertebral bodies are. So they're going to rotate around an axis, and that axis of rotation for them is about the middle of the spinal canal. So they're just kind of rocking like that. So
Can I take a quick to the bathroom?
sure. Yeah.
Still alive.
Rocking which way? Sorry.
So for each vertebrae, the axis of rotation would be about the middle of the dural tube, and so the posterior processes are moving backwards, and the front of the vertebral bodies are moving anterior, superiorly. Yeah, so it's rocking like that. Yeah. So what we feel during flexion is all the posterior processes moving inferiorly. And during extension, we feel them all moving anteriorly. Superiorly, I mean.
Right. Yeah.
So
Up and down.
this would be, so when you're on the table, we call moving this direction belly dad. It's moving towards your belly.
Oh.
And moving that direction is ceiling dad. And that's caudad. No. That's where it comes from,
Oh.
So, and anyway, so to treat this system, the person's lying on the table, and you come and put one hand I just make contact with the occiput right here at the posterior. This is the occipital protuberance here, and since all this is muscle, you just make as much contact as you can, and then contact these posterior processes with your fingers. And then the other hand is right here, and I'm making contact with the sacrum with my other finger, and these fingers are on the posterior process. So I basically have the sacrum here and the occiput here. Now, the way a lot of classes teach to treat the dural tube is you literally cradle the occiput in one hand and cradle the sacrum in the other hand and drive that force with that, drive it like that. But I found if you just make that very light little cranial contact with each one and tune in and listen, you can treat it a lot better. So,
Where do you want my head?
head it this way.
We have two cameras there. Very cool.
Is that okay there? You want it up a little more?
Yes, that's better.
Better? Okay. So, this was my mom's chair when she was little, and then I used it as my desk chair all through
Oh.
high school and college, and it's still my desk chair, so.
So nobody else sits on that. That's
No.
a message.
It's okay. So, so the hand placement, again, like I said, I come in, I just put my fingertips on the posterior processes, and I move down until I'm just barely contacting the sacrum,
So your pinky's on the sacrum?
my index finger, because it's this hand.
Oh,
So
okay,
the
thanks.
sacrum is right there.
Got it.
And I'm using the lateral side of my finger to contact the sacrum, and this part's still on like L5. Okay? So, again, you want to be able to tune into different parts of your fingers. So that'd be right about there. And then for, similarly in the cervical area, go ahead and look straight. Just come under and I contact, put my finger on the posterior processes and just come up until I contact the occiput. Okay, so can you roll towards me? Sorry. No. So see where my fingers are here? And then just just touching the posterior processes, and the sacrum's there, and the occiput's up here.
Actually, this
Can
way.
stay on
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay?
You got it?
Go ahead and lay back down, sorry. That's uncomfortable. Okay, so then I just tune in. And the idea is that when the occiput goes into flexion, the sacrum ought to be going into flexion, right? And not, there shouldn't be a lag time really. It should just, like the pulleys on the clothesline. And the same when it goes into extension. And ideally too, the excursion would be the same. In other words, one would be moving more than the other one. So Sabir's in a therapeutic pulse right now, so I'm just waiting, just you know, being with it. There's actually a little bit of heat coming out both places, top and bottom. And so again, she's already working, so I just would work with that, just waiting and being very attentive, following any motions, any unwinding that might happen. So I'll just while we're waiting, I'll just describe that. Again, the allopathic approach is to when you get all the way to the end of flexion, that's all the process is moving down, right? And so that at the end of flexion, then you would use your right hand to then nudge the sacrum a little further down, and then you release it, and then as it goes into extension, everything moves up. Then you'd use your left hand to nudge the occiput a little further into extension. Then you release it, follow it down into flexion, nudge, extension, nudge. Okay, that's the way you would sort of drive the dural tube if it needed it. Another treatment you can do from here is cast your awareness up and down the vertebral column between your two hands and feel how each level is moving. And then if you find places that are stuck, then what you can do is, if you want to stay in this position, you can try the nudging to see if you can rock it loose, so to speak. Or you can just go right directly to the restriction, and use, you know, more direction of energy or unwinding and stuff. So right now it feels like there's a bit of a disconnect between her occiput and her sacrum. And there's more range of motion at the occiput than the sacrum. And there's a little bit of lag time delay. So the occiput starts moving, the sacrum, you know, maybe half second later starts moving. So when I cast up and down, can anybody see where the restriction is?
Solar plexus area.
Yeah, right. Just, yeah, the back, kind of the back of the respiratory diaphragm, right? So what I would do in the office at this point, the most expedient thing to do would be to leave this hand under where it is, slide it up a little bit, contact those upper lumbar, lower cervical, or lower thoracic segments, and then put this hand here. Yes, it's right in there. So she does have a little bit of change in the curvature of her spine right there. So you know how it would be starting into the normal, out of the lordosis into the kyphosis? Hers, instead of making that nice swoop like that, comes down and kind of levels off right there. Right under. So roll towards me. You're right under my third finger is where that curvature change starts. Right here. And that's about where you guys are seeing the, yeah. So what I would do then, is treat this as best I can. So I tune into it, see what it wants, starts unwinding, my upper hand's unwinding. So I'd follow that through, and then when that released, I would go back and check the dural tube again. So I'll save that for who works on me, if that's okay. So I just have to slide my hand back down a little bit and put my other hand under here and tune in again. So, one of the things we want to strive for too is economy of motion. So, if I'd found this restriction some other way, my own self personally, I probably would have put my left hand under and my right hand on top. I would have come in more from down here a little bit and worked it this way. But to get into this position, see how much I had to move?
Mm-hmm.
And then when I go to check the dural tube again, what do I have to do? Move my chair, move my hands. So get used to being able to treat top and bottom with either hand, too. So I just have to slide up like this, and right there, and I'm there. So now we could have also stayed here and treated the same area by just putting our awareness there and beaming energy there as we did the rock and glide. So they call it a dural tube rock and glide because they break it into two components. So the dural tube, you know, the vertebrae are actually rocking, right? And there's a gliding too. So I generally, when I'm working, I treat it as a compound motion. I treat them both at the same time. But a lot of classes will teach it where you separate out the rock and then you separate out the glide. Okay? So the rock, to nudge the rock, you actually nudge the rocking a little bit. And to nudge the glide, you would just do a straight translational motion. But I tend to, you kind of end up having to do both of them at the same time anyway. So, but it's